There are some people who don't care at all about leaving a financial legacy, but for those who do, it's important to eliminate some of the common estate planning mistakes. So in this episode, we're going to cover topics ranging from poor expense planning to outdated beneficiary designations and family conflict triggers. We're also going to shed some light on misconceptions about transferring real estate and explain the impact of tax implications on your estate. So if you want to leave a legacy without regret or legal turmoil, this episode is a great starting point.
It's easy to get lost on the way to retirement. Things like taxes, improper planning, and excessive market risk can all lead you astray from your goal of a successful and happy retirement. That's where Liz Whittaberry comes in. She's a holistic financial advisor and the founder of Best Path Advisors, and she can help guide you to a better financial path. This is Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry, founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors. Find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com, and get yourself some time onto the calendar or check out some of the different tools, tips, and resources she has. And this week we are going to talk about estate planning because it is one of those pieces, Liz, that, a lot of people, it's kind of an afterthought for many folks. I guess maybe it just depends on what's going on in your life, but a lot of folks just kind of put it on the back burner. So it's important to have this conversation. How are you this week?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Looking forward to chatting with you. Yeah, looking forward to talking about this. So I guess we can just dive right in and kind of, jump into it. You and I were chatting offline before we got started, because of a healthcare scare, right? You have to change my schedule a little bit, and you're very accommodating. And so it works out really well with our conversation today because, failing to plan for expenses or unforeseen things, especially healthcare, can really cause a problem when it comes to, thinking about this stuff. Or it triggers you to go, maybe I do need to get an estate plan put together, right?
Right. Either having something happen to you or to someone close to you suddenly brings into focus the way that this can impact all the different areas of your life. And up until that point, you're not thinking about it, and so you're not necessarily looking at all of the different things that you need to look at. I actually got an email recently. Mm-hmm. I had met with a couple. They didn't become clients, but they had listened to a podcast or a YouTube or whatever. And so we had a meeting just to talk about their long-term care insurance that they had. The premiums had gone way up. And so I compared it to other options they had, gave them some feedback, and they decided to keep their policies. And I just got an email thanking me because they need to use them.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And they had seriously thought about dropping them. And it is covering some pretty expensive care that is needed for one of the spouses. So, it's that sort of thing. If you're not really thinking about it because it's not impacting you at the moment, then you may not think through all the different issues. That's where talking with somebody can help. But
yeah, for sure. Because we think about the foreseen stuff, right? But not the unforeseen. To your point with that email. But talk to me a little bit about some of the foreseen things because we're planning for some of that.
Yeah, I see a lot of people that don't build in all of the big expenses in retirement. Are you going to get another car at any point in time? How many cars? Are you going to have to do anything to fix up your home? Maybe even do some adjustments to make it safer for you as you age.
Right, yeah.
That you might not be thinking about today because, you're still active and you don't need those changes yet. Yeah, and so I see people that don't think about all of those different expenses. They don't have them built into the plan, and they haven't thought through, well, how does that impact everything along the way, as well as what our legacy goal is? And just making sure you've built it into the plan, I think, is very important. But I think another thing that people don't necessarily think through is how is their power of attorney going to act for them? Who is that person going to be? When are they going to need to step in? How are they going to know what they need to know?
And you don't think about it till you go to the hospital or something for an event or a procedure, and they're like, do you have this, this, and this? And you're like, no.
Right. Or somebody is suddenly stepping in for mom or dad, and, they're asking me, well, what questions do I need to ask? And how do I do this? How do I handle this? Because, there's not a easy checklist to go to follow this through. So you do need to do some planning ahead of time and think about those things for yourself
Yeah.
And for the people in your life, your parents, other loved ones in your life that you might need to help out.
There's no specific survey out there, but I was just doing a little looking while you were chatting about that. And it's, roughly on the last one this is about 4 or 5 years ago, it's estimated that people over the age of 50 only have about 28% have a power of attorney or an advanced care directive, right, in place, right, of 28% of the people over 50. And that was almost 5 years ago, right? So that was, prior to COVID, or right around COVID. So hopefully that changed, but, we'll see. But along those lines, right, things you don't think about doing is that, and also thinking about, beneficiary designations. I mean, it's easy for me and my wife. We have one kid, but
Right.
But you may have a more complex situation where, you got to make sure this stuff's updated. And that's such a low-hanging, easy fruit to fix, Liz. It's a quick fix a lot of times to do this.
It is. But I would say that what I see is that people do have beneficiaries named on most things, but they haven't really thought through the contingent beneficiaries.
Okay.
They haven't thought through, is everything still in line with our will and our trust so that it all flows together? And they haven't thought through, how is it going to impact different beneficiaries that receive? What is exactly going to each person? So checking those beneficiaries, making sure that you actually have them on each account and that everything is going to the person that you want to receive it. It matches your will, it matches your trust, it matches the full estate plan. I think that is very important. And so looking at it from time to time, because you forget, people think that they have something a certain way, and then it really is not quite that way. It's not going to flow quite the way that they think it's going to flow.
Yeah, it's a great point that you made about checking all the pieces and make sure that it matches the will and the trust. Because a lot of times we think about beneficiary designations on like our life insurance, right? But you forget you could do it on the 401k and the IRA and, so on and so forth. So checking all those documents is really important. Another part of that estate planning step. You mentioned in the opener, like family conflict or just kind of dealing with potential things. I think, having the conversations is a great place to start, Liz. If mom or dad need to make sure they're having this chat, especially if they got a larger family, be really clear and intentional about these conversations. Yeah?
Yes. And sometimes people don't want to have that conversation because they don't want to let kids know how they're leaving things or how much there is. And I have talked to some kids that we're clueless. We know that they have something in place, but we don't know what it is. And they're older kids, because I work with people that are close to being retired or already retired. And so mom and dad are much older. And that really makes it difficult for everybody because nobody knows how to plan. They don't know what to expect. And then if there's something, maybe parents are building in, or maybe you want to build in yourself, some provisions for protecting what goes to your children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So protecting it against creditors, protecting it against divorce, protecting it against disability, different things that could happen. Well, if you don't talk through those provisions, then the person inheriting may misunderstand what you were really trying to do. They may not understand what they need to do to help carry that out and carry that forward. I think another thing that people have a hard time thinking about is really, how do we make this fair? Not necessarily equal, but how do we make this fair? Because you could have one child that's living in a state that doesn't have any income tax, another child that's living in a state that has very high income tax. And so what they inherit on a net basis after they have to pay the tax that they need to pay on it could be very different. Just trying to think through some of those things, I think would be very helpful to leaving the best legacy that you can, then having those conversations so that people understand really what you're trying to pass on to them, the values behind it, the purpose behind it, not just leaving something that they find out about after you're not here.
How often do you have conversations about trust? Because I find that so many people will say, I'll hear them often say stuff like, yeah, I got my will in place and so we're good to go and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, a will's important, don't get me wrong, but as we say often, a will just means you will go through probate. And so depending on the size of your estate or how you want things to be done, a trust may be on your radar, and they're not as costly as people, once thought they were. I think we all used to think that, oh, you're a trust fund baby. Your parents must have hundreds of millions of dollars, but that's not really the case at all. You can have a trust with a modest estate.
Yes, definitely. I talk about trust with all of my clients, and most of them have trusts, living trusts. So that revocable living trust is an alternative to a will. And what I find is that sometimes people think, when you hear the word trust, they think complicated.
Yeah, for sure.
They think it's going to be so restrictive to my heirs. It's going to be very costly when I'm not here. And that's not true if you're using it as an alternative to a will to pass things on to your heirs. None of that has to be true. It really depends on how you write it and how much you want to write into it. But I like the trust personally, and that's what I have, for the privacy.
Yep.
For the fact that it is much quicker to be able to then start managing the estate, because you don't have to wait on probate. You don't have to wait to get the court hearing set up and all the pieces to that. As soon as you have a death certificate, the trustee can start dealing with the things that are coordinated with the trust. So for the privacy and the speed of being able to just move forward and take care of what needs to be taken care of, I like it a lot better. You can also build in a lot more ifs, ands, this, that, all of the contingencies.
You can get the minutia going on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier to build it into the trust, because this is not a document that's going on file at the courthouse. So lawyers will be more verbose in that document as opposed to what I see in a will. And so it actually has better, more robust language. The other thing about the trust is that anything that is under the trust, if somebody is incapacitated, that trustee can begin dealing with the estate and the things that need to be done. They don't have to wait. If mom or dad is in hospice, they don't have to wait until mom or dad has passed away. They can start dealing with some of the things that need to be dealt with, getting, maybe shifting some things around, getting things ready. So, and they certainly can't give them to beneficiaries yet, but they can start actually working on things that need to be worked on.
Gotcha. And don't forget to fund the trust. I've talked to a lot of advisors, and they often say people will go through the process, they'll put a trust together, then they never fund it right, and then it's basically you just wasted the money. It's just useless. It's just sitting there, right? So that's an important piece that working with a financial professional can certainly help you with. So, because obviously you're not an attorney.
What I do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're not an attorney. You're not crafting the trust, but you are working with the attorney in that regard, and then of course you're taking care of the financial side. So,
I'm making sure that whatever they have from that planning perspective is lined up in the correct way. Do we want to have the trust actually be the beneficiary or the owner of this asset, whatever it might be, or do we want a person to be the beneficiary with the trust as maybe a final contingent beneficiary down the road someplace? And it might be an IRA going to the spouse and then to the kids, and then with the trust as the last in line. And so those are things that we have to think through relative to the plan and what people are trying to accomplish. But then I help them think through making sure everything flows the way that they really want it to flow.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, for sure. And what gets caught up in some of that stuff, Liz, and you were talking about whether it's a will or whether it's a trust or whether it's just whatever, is what are you doing with some of the different assets or property, especially if you got more than one piece of property, or even just the one. But transferring real estate is a big piece of this conversation. And a lot of folks think they're clever and they say, hey, let's just do this before I die. And with the rules and the way things are set up, you are really doing yourself and your loved ones a disservice if you do that.
And in fact, I just had a conversation with one of my clients because his mom is aging. And so she's beginning to think, well, what do I do with the different things? And there's some family land that, she doesn't even live in that state anymore. And so the question was, should we just go ahead and divide it up between all of the siblings? And I said, you're going to miss out on the step up in basis. And you don't want to do it that way. It's much better to just leave it as is and then get the step up in basis when mom passes away, because what that means is when you sell the land, your cost basis is the value as of the date the mom passed away,
right,
as opposed to whatever her cost basis is. And she does have a cost basis in it, but it's from, 50 years ago. So it's a very small cost basis compared to the current value of that land, the current market value. And they would have to pay a large, mom, if mom sold it, would pay a very large amount of income tax on that cost base, that gain. She'd be paying 23.8%, your 20% capital gains tax plus your 3.8% net investment tax on all of the gain, which would be most of the value of the land. Well, that's a pretty big chunk to give up.
Yeah, for sure. And really, that's the final piece to consider, too. Well, not the final, but there's so many pieces. But really an important piece for our conversation today, Liz, is just overall tax implications of your estate, whatever that might be.
Yes. And one of the things that I like to talk to people about is let's think through which assets are going to be the best to leave versus the ones that you spend versus the ones that you give away. A lot of my clients are very charitably minded and inclined to leave something to charity. And different assets really do better for different of those jobs. If you want to minimize your lifetime income tax, then you want to be giving the assets that have the highest amount of tax to charity. You want to leave the assets to your kids that are going to get the step up, eliminate the cost basis. And you want to spend the other assets to the extent that it doesn't push your own income, year to year too high. I mean, there's a balance here. And so we're navigating that and overall trying to minimize that lifetime income tax by looking at the total picture as we go along. That really makes a big difference. It used to be that, leaving your IRA to your kids would give them the ability to stretch over their entire lifetime, and then they could leave to their grandkids and they could continue to stretch. Well, with the Secure Act, that's been eliminated. You now have just 10 years after the original IRA owner's death to get the money out of that IRA. So that's another big piece of the planning that I do. What can we do to, reduce the balance of the IRA or other tax-deferred money so that we're not creating this, bigger tax bill for your heirs at the point in time that they inherit? Can we move some to Roth? Can you spend some of this even though you're not at required minimum distribution age, but can we spend some of it at lower tax brackets and just begin to shave that down and level that out over your lifetime and then on beyond it over your beneficiaries' time period? So, those are the kind of things that I think people need to sit down and think about, look at all of it from that big picture view. What do I really want to accomplish? And then what can I do with the assets that I have? Everybody has a different mix of assets. Some people have lots of real estate. Some have, almost none. Some have a lot of IRA money. Some have a lot of taxable money. So just looking at those pieces and then figuring out how does this fit together, this puzzle fit together the best for me, for my heirs, for my legacy, all of the things that I want to do.
Yeah, and that's really just, another piece of the path that you need to be walking in retirement. And if you want to be on your best path, then reach out to Liz and get started today with a conversation. If you're not already working with her, then give her not give her a jingle, but find her online at bestpathadvisors.com. I guess you could give her a jingle when you go online. You can get the phone number, bestpathadvisors.com. That's bestpathadvisors.com. Don't forget to subscribe to her on Apple, Spotify, and podcast form, or YouTube. All those resources are there on her website as well. So a lot of good stuff at bestpathadvisors.com. Liz, thanks for breaking this one down. I always appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great week.
You too. Thank you, Mark.
We'll see you next time. Yeah, absolutely.
Next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next time here on Retire on Your Best Path with Liz Whittaberry, founder and financial advisor at Best Path Advisors.
The preceding program is sponsored by Best Path Advisors, which is solely responsible for its content. Securities offered through J.W. Cole Financial, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through J.W. Cole Advisors. Best Path Advisors, J.W. Cole Financial, and J.W. Cole Advisors are unaffiliated entities. The opinions expressed by Liz Whitberry should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or investment advice, nor as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Neither J.W. Cole Financial nor its representatives provide legal, tax, or accounting advice. Persons who provide such advice do so in a capacity other than as a registered representative of J.W. Cole. Investing is subject to risks, including the loss of principal. Due to volatility within the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable, however, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed.